I never thought I'd be the kind of person who talks in their sleep. Hell, I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd end up sharing a cabin in the middle of nowhere with someone who'd make me lose sleep in the first place. But there I was, 3 weeks into what was supposed to be a simple summer research project, lying awake at 2 in the morning, staring at the wooden beams of our cabin ceiling, trying to figure out when exactly everything had gotten so complicated. Let me back up. My name is Dylan, and I'm a graduate student studying environmental science. When my advisor told me about this opportunity to spend 8 weeks at a remote research station in the Cascades, collecting data on forest regeneration patterns, I jumped at it. I needed the credit hours. Sure, but more than that, I needed to get away. Away from the city, away from the noise, away from my ex-girlfriend Emma, who I'd broken up with 6 months earlier for reasons I still couldn't fully explain to anyone, including myself. The mountains seemed like the perfect place to clear my head. What I didn't expect was Theodore Ashworth, to be precise, though he introduced himself as Theo within the first 30 seconds of meeting me. He was the other graduate student assigned to the project, from a university 2 states over, studying his own related research on soil composition. We'd be sharing the small 2-bedroom cabin that served as the research station's living quarters for the duration of the summer. When he first walked through that cabin door, backpack slung over one shoulder, I felt something shift in my chest that I immediately tried to ignore. He had this sandy brown hair that fell just a bit too long over his forehead, these green eyes that seemed to catch every bit of light in the room, and this easy smile that made me feel like we'd known each other for years instead of seconds. He was tall, maybe an inch taller than my 6 feet, with the kind of build that suggested he spent more time hiking mountains than sitting in libraries, despite being neck-deep in a doctoral program. The first week was easy. We fell into a comfortable routine. Wake up at dawn, coffee on the small porch overlooking the valley, head out to our respective research sites, return for lunch, back out for afternoon work, then evening spent comparing notes, cooking dinner together, and usually ending up on that same porch with beers, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and pink. Theo was easy to talk to. He had this way of listening that made you want to tell him everything, leaning forward slightly, his full attention on you like nothing else in the world mattered in that moment. We talked about everything. Our research, obviously, but also our lives, our families, our dreams. He told me about growing up in Vermont, about his dad teaching him to identify trees by their bark, about his younger sister who was getting married in the fall. I told him about my childhood in suburban Colorado, about my mom's battle with cancer that she'd won 3 years ago, about my uncertainty regarding what I actually wanted to do after finishing my degree. What I didn't tell him about was Emma. Or rather, I mentioned her in passing, the way you mention any ex. But I didn't tell him about the real reason we'd broken up, about the growing feeling that something was wrong, that I was going through the motions of a relationship that should have made me happy, but somehow didn't, about the guilt that ate at me because Emma was wonderful and I couldn't figure out what was missing, about the relief I'd felt after the breakup, which only made the guilt worse. The second week, things started to change. Small things at first. I found myself watching Theo more, the way his hands moved when he was explaining something he was passionate about, the way he'd push his hair back from his forehead when he was concentrating, the way he laughed, this full-body thing that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. I told myself I was just appreciating having a good friend, someone easy to be around during what could have been a lonely summer. Then came the morning of day 16. I woke up to find Theo already awake, sitting at our small kitchen table with his coffee, but instead of his usual morning greeting, he was quiet. There was something different in the way he looked at me, something I couldn't quite read. Careful, maybe. Uncertain. I poured my own coffee and sat down across from him. The silence stretched between us, which was unusual. We'd gotten comfortable enough that silence was normally easy, but this felt weighted somehow. Finally, he spoke. His voice was soft, almost cautious. "So, I need to tell you something. and I'm not really sure how to bring it up without making it weird. My heart started beating faster, though I couldn't have told you why. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice normal. He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug, looking down at it instead of at me. You talk in your sleep sometimes. I don't know if you knew that. I felt my face heat up. Oh God, I'm sorry. Have I been keeping you awake? I can try. No, it's not that, he interrupted, then paused. It's just, last night you were saying something. And I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I feel like it would be weirder not to tell you, and now I'm rambling, which I do when I'm nervous, and... He stopped himself, took a breath. You said my name. Several times. You were dreaming and you were saying my name. The cabin suddenly felt very small. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. What? Yeah. He finally looked up at me, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. And look, I don't want to make this awkward or read into something that isn't there, but I've been lying awake for the past 2 hours, trying to figure out if I should mention it, and I just thought you should know. I couldn't breathe properly. My mind was racing, trying to remember my dreams from the night before, coming up with only fragments, images of hiking with Theo, of his smile, of his hand reaching for mine. Oh God. I'm sorry, I don't know what to say, I managed. Theo's expression softened. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. In case... He trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. We sat there in the heaviest silence I'd ever experienced. My coffee was getting cold. Outside, birds were starting their morning songs. Inside, my entire world was tilting on its axis. In case what? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He met my eyes, and I saw something there that made my breath catch. In case it meant something. The rest of that day was torture. We went to our respective research sites as usual, but I couldn't focus. I kept replaying the conversation, the look in his eyes, the careful way he'd said those words. In case it meant something. Did it mean something? What did it mean? And more pressingly, what did I want it to mean? I'd never thought about guys that way. At least I'd told myself I'd never thought about guys that way. But as I sat there among the trees, pretending to record data, I couldn't stop thinking about Theo, about the way my stomach flipped when he smiled at me, about how I'd started looking forward to our evenings together more than anything else in my day, about how I'd caught myself watching his lips when he talked, about how the thought of this summer ending and going our separate ways made something in my chest ache. Oh no. I stayed out later than usual that day, not because I had more work to do, but because I was terrified to go back to the cabin. Terrified of what I might say, what I might do, what this all meant about who I was. I'd been so sure I had myself figured out, 26 years old, and I thought I knew exactly who Dylan Carter was. Apparently, I'd been wrong. When I finally forced myself back to the cabin as the sun was setting, I found Theo on the porch, dinner already made, 2 plates sitting on the small table we'd set up out there. He looked up when I approached, and his expression was guarded in a way it had never been before. "Hey," he said. "I made pasta. Hope that's okay." "Yeah, that's great. Thanks." I sat down across from him, and we ate in silence for a few minutes. It was unbearable. Dylan," he finally said, setting down his fork. "I'm sorry if I made things weird this morning. I shouldn't have said anything. What if it did mean something?" The words came out before I could stop them. He froze, his eyes going wide. "What?" I put down my own fork, my hands shaking slightly. "You said in case it meant something. What if it did? What if..." I couldn't believe I was about to say this. What if I have been dreaming about you, and what if it's because I can't stop thinking about you when I'm awake either? The silence that followed felt like it lasted for hours. Theo was staring at me, and I couldn't read his expression. I'd just blown up my entire life with a few sentences, and I couldn't take them back. Didn't want to take them back, I realized. Dylan, are you... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I don't know what I'm saying, I admitted, my voice rough. I've only ever dated women. I thought I was straight. I was engaged to Emma, for God's sake. But then I met you, and something about you just... I ran my hand through my hair, frustrated with my inability to articulate what I was feeling. You make me feel things I've never felt before. When you smile at me, my whole day gets better. When you touch my shoulder or my arm, I feel it for hours afterward. I look for excuses to sit closer to you, and apparently I'm saying your name in my sleep, so there's that. Theo was still staring at me, but now there was something else in his expression. Hope, maybe. For the record, he said quietly, I'm gay. I probably should have mentioned that before now, but it never seemed relevant until now. Oh, I said, which seemed wildly inadequate. And also for the record, he continued, leaning forward slightly. I've been half in love with you since about day 3 of this trip, which is insane and probably way too fast. But there it is. I've been trying really hard not to show it because I didn't think you were... you mentioned your ex-girlfriend, and I just assumed... I assumed too, I said. About myself, I mean. Turns out I was wrong. He smiled then, this small, cautious thing that made my heart race. So what do we do now? That was the question, wasn't it? We were stuck in this cabin together for 5 more weeks. If this went badly, it would be the most awkward 5 weeks of our lives. But if it went well, then what? We lived in different states. We had different lives waiting for us back in the real world. None of this was practical or sensible. But when I looked at Theo, at the hope and fear and want written across his face, I realized I didn't care about practical or sensible. I started, then stopped. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Can I kiss you? His smile widened, transforming his whole face. I thought you'd never ask. I stood up, my chair scraping against the wooden porch, and he stood too. We were standing there, facing each other in the fading light, and I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never kissed a man before. I'd never wanted to kiss a man before. But I wanted this. I wanted him. I stepped closer, closing the distance between us, and I could see his chest rising and falling with quick breaths. He was nervous too, I realized. That helped somehow. I lifted my hand, touching his face gently, and his eyes fluttered closed for just a second before opening again to meet mine. Is this okay? I whispered. More than okay, he whispered back. I kissed him. It was tentative at first, gentle, just our lips touching, and it felt like every cliché I'd ever rolled my eyes at. Fireworks, electricity, coming home. His lips were soft, and he tasted like the pasta we'd been eating, and something else, something that was just him. He made this small sound in the back of his throat, and his hands came up to grip my shirt, pulling me closer. The kiss deepened, became more confident, and I felt something slot into place inside me, like a puzzle piece I hadn't known was missing. This was what had been wrong with Emma. This was what had been missing from every relationship I'd ever had. Not because they were women necessarily, but because they weren't this. They weren't him. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he was smiling at me with such joy that I couldn't help but smile back. Wow, he said. Yeah, I agreed. Wow. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Then he laughed, this happy, disbelieving sound. I can't believe this is happening. Me neither, I said. I'm kind of freaking out, to be honest. His expression turned more serious, concerned. We can slow down. We don't have to... No, I interrupted. I mean, yes, I'm freaking out, but not because I don't want this. I do want this. I'm freaking out because I've apparently been lying to myself about who I am for 26 years, and that's a lot to process. But I don't want to slow down. I don't want to pretend this morning didn't happen. I don't want to go back to before. He reached for my hand, lacing our fingers together, and even that simple touch sent warmth through me. We'll figure it out together then. No rush. We have time. We did have time. 5 more weeks in this cabin, in this beautiful isolation from the rest of the world. 5 weeks to figure out what this was, what we were, without the pressure of real life crashing in. It felt like a gift. That night, we stayed up late on the porch, talking about everything we'd been holding back. Theo told me about his first crush on a boy in middle school, about coming out to his family in college, about past relationships and heartbreaks. I told him about the growing unease I'd felt in my relationship with Emma, about the dreams I'd had over the years that I'd dismissed as meaningless, about the way I'd always found excuses to avoid commitment. I think part of me always knew, I admitted as we sat there, his head resting on my shoulder, but it was easier not to examine it too closely, easier to just follow the path that was expected. "And now?" he asked. "Now I can't imagine not examining it, not examining this." I turned my head to kiss his temple. Not examining us. The next few weeks were like existing in a separate reality. During the days, we did our research, professional and focused. But the evenings were ours. We cooked together, learning each other's rhythms in the small kitchen. We hiked to hidden spots in the mountains, places where we could sit and talk for hours without worrying about being seen. We kissed under the stars, touched with increasing confidence, learned what made the other person sigh or laugh or pull closer. I was learning myself too, learning that I liked the scratch of his stubble against my skin, learning that the solid weight of his body against mine felt right in a way nothing ever had before, learning that I could be attracted to strength and softness at the same time, that desire could feel both familiar and entirely new. There were difficult moments, too, times when the reality of what this meant for my identity crashed in, and I had to sit with the discomfort of rewriting my own narrative. Times when I worried about what people back home would think, what my family would say. Times when the future seemed impossibly complicated. But Theo was patient with me, never pushing, always listening. And gradually, the fear became less than the joy. The uncertainty became less than the certainty that this, whatever this was real and worth fighting for. One night, about a week before we were scheduled to leave the research station, we were lying in his bed. We'd given up the pretense of separate rooms by then, and he was tracing patterns on my chest with his fingertips. "What happens when we leave here?" he asked quietly. It was the question we'd both been avoiding. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I know I don't want this to end. It's going to be complicated. We live 8 hours apart. We both have another year of school at least, and you're still figuring things out about yourself." "I know." I caught his hand, bringing it to my lips to kiss his knuckles. "But I also know that what I feel for you isn't going to change just because we're not in this cabin anymore. I don't have all the answers, Theo. I'm probably going to mess this up sometimes, but I want to try. I want to try with you." He was quiet for a moment, then shifted to look at me directly. "I want that too. I want you. Not just summer cabin you, but real world you. All the complications and uncertainties included. Even if I'm still figuring out how to come out. Even if it's messy. Especially then," he said firmly. "Dylan, you don't have to have everything figured out right now. You don't have to have all the labels sorted or know exactly what your identity means to you. You just have to be honest. With yourself and with me. Can you do that?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. Could I be honest? Could I admit to myself and to the world that I was falling in love with a man? That my understanding of myself had been incomplete? That I was still learning who I was, but that whoever that person turned out to be, he wanted Theo in his life. "Yes," I said, "I can do that." He smiled and kissed me, soft and sweet. "Then we'll figure out the rest as we go." Our last week at the cabin was bittersweet. We finished our research, packed up our data, and tried not to think about the goodbye that was coming. On our final night, we sat on the porch one last time, watching the sun set over the mountains. "I'm going to miss this place," I said. "The cabin or the mountains?" Theo asked. "Both, but mostly what they represent. This space where I could figure things out without the whole world watching." He squeezed my hand. "You know, the world is going to be more understanding than you think. It won't be perfect, and yeah, some people might surprise you in bad ways. But some will surprise you in good ways too." "When did you get so wise?" "I've had a few more years to process this stuff than you have." He turned to face me. "But Dylan, seriously, you don't have to tell everyone tomorrow. You don't have to make any grand announcements. You just have to keep being honest with yourself. The rest will follow." I kissed him, trying to pour everything I felt into it. Gratitude and fear and hope and love. Especially love. "Thank you," I said when we pulled apart, "for being patient with me, for seeing something in me before I could see it myself." "Thank you for being brave enough to explore it," he replied, "for not running away when things got confusing." We went inside eventually, spending our last night wrapped around each other, talking until we couldn't keep our eyes open anymore. And when I drifted off to sleep, I wasn't worried about what I might say in my dreams, because the person whose name I'd been saying was right there beside me, and he already knew everything that mattered. The drive down from the mountains the next morning was quiet. We'd exchanged numbers, made plans to visit each other, talked about video calls and text messages, and all the ways we'd stay connected, but it still felt like leaving something precious behind. When we reached the point where we'd have to go in different directions, Theo pulled over to the side of the road. We sat there for a moment, neither of us wanting to be the first to say goodbye. "This isn't the end," he said finally. "This is just the next chapter. I know, it just feels huge, terrifying, like everything's changing." "Yeah, all of that." He reached over and took my hand. "It is all of that. But Dylan, you're not alone in this. Whatever happens next, whatever you need to figure out about yourself, I'm here. Maybe not physically all the time, but I'm here." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Then I leaned over and kissed him one more time, trying to memorize the feel of it, the taste of it, the rightness of it. "I'll call you tonight," I said when we pulled apart. "You better." We said our goodbyes, and I watched him drive away until his car disappeared around a bend in the road. Then I sat there for a few more minutes, processing everything that had happened over the past 8 weeks. I'd come to these mountains looking for clarity about my career, about my future, about what I wanted from life. I hadn't expected to find clarity about myself instead, about who I was and who I could love, about the ways I'd been hiding from my own truth without even realizing it. My phone buzzed with a text from Theo. "Already missing you. Drive safe. Can't wait to hear your voice tonight." I smiled and texted back. "Missing you too. Talk soon." As I pulled back onto the road, heading toward home and whatever came next, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, maybe ever. I felt like myself, complicated, uncertain, still figuring it out myself, but myself nonetheless. And if I happened to say Theo's name in my sleep that night, and every night after, well, that was okay, because he'd been right. It did mean something. It meant everything.